welcome everybody back to a new episode of B&B Movie Reviews. And yeah, Brad, we're back. We
Yeah,
nothing's
trapped in
changed
this Zoom room.
in this box. I'm in this box.
I miss our
Yeah,
studio.
I know. I do. But we got to get these reviews out, man. We
You
got to
got
get
to
these
do it.
reviews
You
out.
got to do it.
Got to do it. Got to do it, man. All right. So we're going to kick off this episode with a couple of new releases. One hasn't come out yet, and one that has just came out this past week, and a retro review, an anniversary for Revenge of the Sith, 20 years.
Oh my God!
I know. Every
When
time
you
I
told
say
me
that,
that, Bryan, it made me nauseous.
I know. It is 2005. That's crazy to even think about. But we're going to start this off with Death of a Unicorn. So, let me kick this off with the synopsis. A father-daughter duo, Elliot and Ridley, hit a unicorn with their car and bring it to their wilderness retreat of a mega wealthy pharmaceutical CEO. That's pretty accurate, I think, a
Yeah,
description.
that's what the movie's about.
This movie, it kind of, we talk about, big budget, and we talk about like some of these IP driven stories that kind of A24 wants to adopt. This movie, I think, really kind of takes a lot of kind of visual cues and story beats from Jurassic Park, which I thought was kind
Sure,
of fun to kind of
sure,
watch and see.
sure.
When you kind of get into the meat of the story with the unicorns and
Meat,
everything, I thought
a lot of meat at the center of this story.
there is no spoilers, but there is a lot of meat in this movie. But what are some of your thoughts, man, about this film?
I think it delivers on the premise, right? You read that log
Yeah,
line and you go, yeah, that's what this movie is.
yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
still pretty darn subversive. I think it does still
yeah.
feel like an A24 movie.
Yes,
I think the cast is fantastic, and I think that the thematics are biting and relevant to today.
yeah, absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
it's a good time. It's a good, gory, gross time.
Yeah,
That being said, I feel like it's actually like 1 or 2 degrees dialed down from a great movie. Like if they had
yeah,
turned it up just a little bit,
just a little
and
bit. Yeah,
really pushed the gnarliness of this story and the awfulness of the people at the center
of
of
the
this
character.
story,
Yes,
I
yes,
think we could have had kind of like a brilliant movie. As is, it's a good time at the cinema that makes you think a little bit, that has a lot of
yeah,
genuine emotion and
yeah.
a lot of weirdness.
No, you're right. I agree with all those points. And watching the film, I was thinking the same thing. And I know I can't remember what movie we reviewed before, but you had mentioned that like a movie kicking into like a second gear for you. And I kind of felt that watching this. Like I enjoyed everything I was seeing, and I thought also seeing this with a crowd of people also helped too, because the crowd was really responding to it,
Yeah.
especially a lot of the comedic moments of it. But for
There was
whatever
one
reason,
woman who lost her mind during a particular
yeah.
gore gag.
Yeah.
She liked it.
Yeah, I was like, okay, you must have never, experienced or seen anything like that on screen before, and that was just like her visceral reaction to that. I thought was hilarious. The way she was responding to that was funny. Um, but yeah, you're right. It just never really kind of kicked into another gear. Well, I mean, but like you said, with that being said, I enjoyed all the performances. I think this is a great ensemble cast. I do like some of the themes and the messaging that is going on about, healthcare and pharmaceuticals, and it's not hitting you over the head with it. It's having a lot of fun with some of these allegories that it's comparing itself to. Not really an allegory, an actual.
Well, it's
I mean, we're
speaking to
talking about.
colonialization. It's speaking to, the way, like
Hmm.
the financial gap.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
has a lot on its mind.
it
But
does. It
at
does.
the same time, it's not anything. It's not anything brilliant. You know, it's
No,
it's
no.
pretty on the nose, but sometimes
Yeah.
subtlety needs to be thrown away, and we need to be on the nose. That's why Bong Joon
Yeah.
Ho goes as hard as he does
As
with
hard, I
his
know, as hard
messaging,
as as hard as he does.
because we're
But I
thick, we're
mean,
stupid people.
yeah, yeah, we got to be just shown it all. And that is true to a certain extent. Man, we got to talk about like some of the character work, man. The two Will Poulter, and this is going to be a Will Poulter episode for the first half of this episode because for the next movie we'll talk about. But two completely different roles that he's playing in these two movies that are coming out really close to each other. He steals this movie, and he is an awful person, but he is so much fun to watch.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, I just thought he steals this movie. He is
he's the
absolutely
spoiled brat
fantastic.
son, and he plays it well. I feel like it's one of those performances where the wardrobe dictates the character. He puts on those short shorts and he just runs with it or hops
Yeah.
with it, as the case may be in this film.
Yes, yes. His dialogue, I thought it was, and this is written. I don't have the gentleman. Actually, I do have IMDb. I just want to get his name, because I don't know if he's a first-time director. Alex Scarfman. Maybe I'm saying that right, but he wrote and directed this film, and I thought he did a really good job with the direction of this. But I thought the writing, and speaking to Will Poulter's character, I thought the writing of his character was really just in the way that his character is fully realized and just the way he has kind of like these really like quips and barbs towards like especially towards Jenna Ortega and Paul Rudd.
Yeah.
He's just a fascinating character to watch, a lot of fun.
But again,
um
I feel like there could have been more with that character. I
yeah,
feel like there could have been more of Anthony Kerrigan as well. They are
yeah,
so good in their tiny roles that you kind of want them to take up more space within the screenplay.
yeah.
And, Jenny Ortega and Paul Rudd are solid too, and the emotional weight of the movie rests on them, and they
Yeah, it
deliver it.
relies on them.
But I think we could have maybe cut a few scenes here and there and given them to Anthony Kerrigan and Will Poulter and had a more
Yeah.
entertaining movie.
Yeah, I think especially with the tone that they're going for in that movie, we could have had a lot more with them because they do provide that comic relief. But this movie is really kind of it's a bit absurd. I mean, when you're talking about
It's a bit
unicorns, I
absurd.
mean, yeah, I mean it's a bit absurd. So I thought, and again, going to our first points that we were making about not really going as hard into into that element of the movie. Yeah, I think if you gave those characters that are absurd, if you gave them a little bit more to balance out what we get with the father-daughter relationship, because I think that really does work. I do wish it would have kind of resonated with me a little bit more because there really is some genuine heart and emotion there, specifically with Jenna Ortega and Paul Rudd and what they're dealing with in the aftermath of
I
some
think
tragedy with their family.
the movie makes some choices towards the end to appeal to a broader audience
Okay.
that detracts from the power that this film could have had. I feel like if it
Mm,
had done a few things differently, it would have been a
okay.
less of a fun time at the movies and more of a thoughtful time at the movies.
Okay.
But you know what? It's still a darn good, entertaining movie, so I can't be too
Yeah.
mad about it. I think
Yeah.
there's also some conversation to be had about the special effects. You get a lot
Yeah.
of unicorn in this movie, and it is
Yeah.
very cartoony CGI, and maybe
Yeah.
that's not your bag. At the same time, like I felt the characters and the actors were just interesting enough to make me not really care about the special effects.
It wasn't too distracting. I mean, I did hear some criticisms about the visual effects of the unicorns in this movie, so I kind of went into this movie knowing that and kind of looking for that, which I kind of wish I didn't have that in the back of my head. But as I was watching it, I took notice of it, but it never distracted me or took me out of the film. So Yeah, the visual effects aren't the best. I do think, and we talked about this coming out of the theater, there are certain shots towards the end that you could see they really honed in on getting that right. And I think it works for those moments to have the
Yeah,
visual effects right in those moments.
it's why they use
So
them for the poster and
overall,
the trailer.
yeah, well, yeah, true. Yeah, the trailer shots. But overall, I thought it worked. So what's your rating for this one?
Yeah, it's not going to be for everybody, and you got to enjoy a little meat in your films. You got
It's
to be able
true.
to handle a little goriness. But if you can, then it's a big B plus. We're the B&B show. If we like something, we give it a B
Yeah.
plus. We don't like something, we give it a B minus. It's a big B plus for me.
Yeah, it's a B plus for me as well. I think it's a great time at the theater. I think you'll really get a lot of genuine emotion from the two leads, and then you'll love Will Poulter who steals every scene he's in. And if you're willing to, I think you'll definitely get something out of it as far as like some of the themes, the social themes that the movie is speaking to as well. Nothing too deep, but nothing subtle at the same time. But still a great time at the theater. So yeah, let's go to.
Mm.
Whew, totally different tone. But yeah, we mentioned Will Poulter, so he has another film, Warfare. This is co-directed by Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza. He dedicates one of this film to one of his fellow soldiers. So let me go ahead and read the synopsis for this film. This is a platoon of Navy SEALs embark on a dangerous mission in Ramadi, Iraq, with the chaos and brotherhood of war retold through their memories of the events. What this
And
movie is
memory
about.
is a subjective state. It's maybe
Yeah,
the most subjective state.
yeah,
Every time you remember something, it does change. And Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza, we saw them in person at the MPA in Washington
yeah,
D.C. Do a Q&A afterwards, and they wanted to make sure that we understood that. That being said, this is based on their memory, the participants
yeah,
of this incident, all the soldiers on the American side that they could get in touch with and recreate this story. So, it does feel like it has an authenticity that a lot of other war movies that are quote unquote based on a true story have.
yeah. 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 And I thought that this was riveting. And I thought that this was a movie. It's weird. We always have a conversation about war movies as far as like and me and you have a specific kind of, because we have close friends of ours who are veterans, and who are
Veterans of
also
this conflict.
yeah, veterans of this specific conflict who are also cinephiles and movie fans like us. And a lot of times when we watch war movies, it's hard to not think about their experiences, or when we watch those movies with our buddies who are war veterans. So it's hard to watch these films and not have that color our own experiences because of how the closeness that we have to our friends who are veterans as well. And I think what Ray Mendoza went into this movie with the intent on not glorifying or glamorizing the what war is. And I thought that that was very specific to what he was going for with the story he was telling here.
They wanted to create an immersive experience, and they absolutely
Yes,
succeeded. There is no score to this film; it's all
no score.
dialogue, sound design, and sound effects. It is told in real time, which means every minute you're seeing on screen is a minute in this story's time. That
Yeah,
doesn't happen too often in
yeah,
cinema, and it's you go into this home, these soldiers, American soldiers, and British soldiers, I guess, too,
mm,
go into this Iraqi family's home, displace them, trap them in a room so that they can observe some potential threats across the street, and then they get found out and suddenly a
Yeah.
grenade goes through a hole in the wall, explodes, and then the movie never stops. It's one of the most
Never stops.
visceral, overwhelming experiences in a theater I have ever had. It is
Yeah.
terrifying. It is horrifying. It is not at all fun.
No.
And I would find it hard to imagine a person going into this movie and going like, man, that was a fun war movie. What a great war movie. And if they did,
Yeah.
then I don't think they have a true understanding of the cost of life.
Of the cost of war. And I think also because I think one of the benefits of going to the MPA and watching this with Alex Garland and Ray Mendoza was the Q&A, because I think the movie speaks for itself. And I think we've been having this conversation since we saw the movie, as far as like how how we all come to films.
War is big business, and in America it is a part of our culture. We have been bred on, John Wayne and the Green Berets and Platoon
Yeah.
and Call of Duty, and most of the time when we get a war movie, even a war movie that claims to be an anti-war movie, it ends up being
Yeah.
something that glamorizes the violence. And
Yeah.
clearly Ray Mendoza and Alex Garland wanted to create something that humanized the violence,
Yeah.
that de-glamorized the violence, and they did that by being just immersive and being
Yeah.
as truthful as they could to the experience that Ray Mendoza and these other soldiers had.
Yeah.
And I think it is successful. They did talk about how, they wanted to make this movie as a bridge. Ray Mendoza wanted this movie to be a bridge between husbands and wives, wives who don't
Yeah.
understand what their husbands went through
Yeah.
in Iraq and in conflict. And maybe you
Yeah.
could give this to a family member to say, this is what I experienced. And I think if I was a family member, if my wife or my husband had gone through that and couldn't communicate to me, this movie could communicate that
Yeah.
experience in some small way. And I think there's value there. Alex
No, you're
Garland
right.
also talked about how these decisions to join up, they happen when you are very young. You join up at 18, 17, and you've made those decisions at 14 or 15, and maybe those 14 and 15-year-olds should watch a movie like Warfare rather
Yeah.
than Saving Private Ryan or
Or Black Hawk
whatever,
Down,
or Black
or
Hawk Down.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything like that. Because even those movies that show you the horrors of war still has like a heroic kind of ideology to it, that sometimes make it misinformed to somebody that's looking to sign up to be a soldier and go overseas and fight for their country, and not to deter anybody who wants to serve for their country, because I would never deter anybody, but I think you also really need to understand what you're signing up for, and that you can possibly lose a limb or lose your life. And is that a sacrifice that you're willing to make, or do you understand what that sacrifice is?
Yeah, I just don't think anybody can truly understand that until they've
No,
experienced that. And even
no,
us watching this movie doesn't really give us an
no,
understanding of what our friends went through in Iraq and
no.
Afghanistan,
Exactly.
right? But
Yeah.
it does give us a better understanding.
There were people coming out of this screening that were really affected by this film, and you could see it.
Yeah,
And
young
you could
people.
tell that they had those experiences. Um, and your heart goes out to them, to those veterans. And I think like we just need to have more empathy, instead of just saying thank you for your service, or letting them on an airplane first. I think we really need to do more for our veterans. And that's one thing I took away from watching this movie, is that we really need to come to their aid when they come back home, and just in general, throughout their lives, really, their physical and mental health. So, yeah, this was a powerful watch, man. And the sound design was you talk about immersive. I had to mention that before we move on. Yeah, the sound design is, I mean, it rocked me. Like there is one explosion that comes out of nowhere, and it literally jolted me out of my seat.
I'm a crier. I cry a lot
Yeah,
during all
yeah,
kinds of
same.
movies. I'll
Yeah.
cry during Michael Bay's Armageddon. I'm a real
Hey, I'm
softie.
with you.
uh, and I honestly cannot remember a time in which I started to cry just by being in the presence of so much violence. You know, when that explosion happens and the screams start and the communication chatter is happening and it's becoming
Yeah,
cacophonous and the
yeah,
machine guns are going. And the other thing about this movie is, we're stuck in this home. There are
yeah.
a few occasions when we leave this one group of people, this one platoon, but for the most part, like, we have one camera and it's like on a person's face, or it's on their gun, or it's on their leg, and we do not know what's going on beyond the frame at all. It's absolute madness. What is actually being
Was
thrown upon this home, where
yeah.
this Iraqi family lives? And it's terrifying. And I just found myself through the power of visuals and sound design getting choked up at the nonstop action.
If
I,
you
I
allow
have
it to.
not been able to stop thinking about it since we've seen it. If I haven't thought about it
Yeah,
every hour since I've seen it, I've definitely thought about it every day since I've seen it.
yeah, same, same, same. So, I mean, it's a B plus for me. What's your rating for this
Oh, it's
one?
a huge B plus. One of the best
Yeah,
movies of the year.
yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like it's hard to quantify. I just
It
have never
is.
seen anything like it. So how could it not be a B
Yeah.
plus?
True, you're right, absolutely. So yeah, no easy way to segue from warfare to the galactic warfare. How about that for a transition? For a
They
segue?
don't have they have a lot in common, actually.
Yeah,
George
so
Lucas
we
was right, friends.
he was. I don't even think we need to go into a synopsis. So we are doing a retro review for Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. This is a film, the prequel trilogy, the final film in the prequel trilogy that came out 20 years ago, 2005. The movie is being re-released later this month, in April. At the end of April, is being re-released in theaters. So we decided to give you an early kind of retro review of Revenge of the Sith.
Something crazy has happened in the 20 years since this movie came out.
You're
You know,
right.
we
I know where
we've
you're
got
going.
we've gotten a lot of other Star Wars movies and TV shows and
Yeah.
cartoons, the Clone Wars series, and I think they do a lot of work in making the prequels even better. But
Yes.
forgetting all that, George Lucas with the prequels was giving us a very basic story about how fascism takes root and how
Mm-mm.
democracy dies with applause and how fear is weaponized by fascists to
Mm.
control the people. And hello 2025. All
I
right,
mean, it
the
seems like he was
relevancy.
yeah, it seems like he was ahead of his time. And you know what?
Or he was just a student of history, man. And
Well,
this is all
true. Yeah, because
cyclical.
history repeats itself. You're right. You're absolutely right. So he was. Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. He was a student of history. And it's been interesting to see how the reappraisal of the prequel trilogy over the last 20 to 25 years and how a lot of people have come around on these movies. And speaking specifically to those three movies, a lot of people do think Revenge of the Sith is the best out of those three. When you take away like the technical aspect of it, some of the acting, some of the wooden acting that you get from the actors, to your point, as far as what George Lucas was speaking to, and you look at the themes of of that movie, I mean, the movie there is a relevancy to that movie that is long lasting.
Yeah, and I think the emotions actually do work. And yes,
Mm,
sure, there is some cringy stuff in all three of the prequels,
yeah,
and I think we also have to recognize that George Lucas is a person who, like James Cameron, is fascinated by technology, and he was trying
technology,
to
yeah,
embrace, computer graphics and digital cinematography before it was probably safe to do so.
yeah.
But I also think that a lot of the great effects that we do have today are a result of the pioneering work that they did do in the
Oh,
prequels.
absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and and I have become much more forgiving of the cringy stuff uh, as I have glommed onto the ideas at play in the
Okay.
prequels.
Okay.
You know, okay, Jar Jar, all right, it's a mistake. Jar Jar's a mistake.
Well, General Grievous. How about that?
Well,
You like that?
I like Grievous. I think the voice work
Yeah.
is a
Yeah. I'm with
choice.
you.
But that's the thing, like
Yeah.
choices are being made, and I like that the film at least
Respect
has
it.
courageous to make choices,
I,
right?
I I respect. I mean, you look in light of where, and I mean, we're a little over now, but I mean, we look. I just want to talk about this. You look in light into where Disney is now with Star Wars, just cinematically, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not going to get. I don't want to start dogpiling on that to really give that the toxic fan base more ammunition and more fuel to the fire. But you look at, the direction of the sequel trilogy has kind of been a little bit aimless. They didn't really know exactly what they wanted to do. And
There
going
were
to your
three of
point
those
about,
movies. I thought there was only
yeah,
two.
it
It was
felt
like
like
Force
well, you're
Awakens
yeah,
and The
Last
Last
Jedi,
Jedi. That's it,
and
right?
yeah, I think yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, I meant to
that's
say
it.
two.
Yeah, they're great. I
um,
love them both.
um, but you're right. I like George Lucas. Whether you like the movies or don't like them, he was doing something. He was telling the story. He had a direction, and he knew what he wanted to tell.
And they were
And you gotta
there. They
respect
were
that.
his stories, right? Like
His
it
stories,
is
yeah,
the expression of George Lucas for good and for bad.
yeah, yeah,
And again, when you then add the Clone Wars, the cartoon series, the second Clone Wars series in particular, to the
yeah,
narrative, the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker is immense. And I have
yeah,
watched it where I've watched Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, then 7 seasons of the Clone Wars,
yeah.
and climaxed it with Revenge of the Sith. And when you do that, man,
It's
when Anakin kills Padme, it is brutal. It is
yeah,
horrifying. It is
yeah,
grotesque.
yeah,
It's so sad. As is, if you just come off of Attack of the Clones, it. I think it's still actually pretty effective.
yeah. No, no, no.
But
I think
but
so too.
boy, the Clone Wars cartoon series does a lot of great heavy lifting,
Yeah,
emotional wise.
and I mean, but you have to give credit to the prequel trilogy for that, because even if we didn't have that trilogy, if it wasn't what it is or what it was or basically what it is, then we wouldn't have got the Clone Wars. We wouldn't have got these 6 seasons, 7 seasons that really kind of fill in these gaps, to tell these compelling stories, to flesh out this galaxy
Yeah, and
in the
you
way
get
that it does, to introduce new characters that we
you,
that we've grown to love.
you have these other storytellers who get to pick up some of these ideas of George Lucas and fully flesh them out, and maybe in some cases dissect them and splay them open, and
Yeah,
you come away from the Clone Wars cartoon series going like, the Gungans are pretty interesting. you know there is
yeah.
stuff there, uh, and I would encourage anyone who doesn't like the the prequels to explore the Clone Wars. You were a person that I begged to watch the Clone
Oh
Wars,
God, yes, yeah.
and I know it was
Loved it.
difficult to start because it is a little wobbly in the beginning.
Yeah,
But if you just jump
lo-
into the third season of the Clone Wars, you're good to go. You're going to watch some good TV.
loved it. So yeah, Revenge of the Sith. What's your? We got to
B
rate it.
plus. I would have given it a B minus 20 years
I,
ago, but I was young
yeah,
and dumb.
yeah. Same. I would give this a B plus. And I'm hopeful and excited to see where Star Wars can go in the future. All right, so those are our thoughts on Revenge of the Sith. Let's go ahead and recap what we have talked about today. So we first started off with Death of a Unicorn. We gave that a B plus. Then we moved over to Warfare, one of the best movies of the year so far. That is also a B plus. And we did a reappraisal of Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars Episode 3. 20 years ago, it would have been a B minus, but today it is a B plus.
Heck yeah.
So, thank you all for watching this latest episode of B&B Movie Reviews. If you have any questions, suggestions, feel free to email us at bnbmoviereviews@gmail.com. And with that, we will see you all at the movies.